Good morning and welcome to the Fundamentals of English Language and Literature Teaching, paper number 10, semester 3 of MA English, part 2. The topic today is cognitivism. While discussing the theories of language learning, we said behaviorism and cognitivism are the two important established theories of learning, along with innate language hypothesis, interlanguage hypothesis, error analysis, and contrastive analysis, as a few hypotheses presented for language learning. In this video, we shall be talking about cognitivism. While behaviorists provide the model of stimulus giving rise to response in a classical conditioning or operant conditioning, the cognitivists believe that there is something which mediates the stimulus and response. Cognitivism means the action or the process of acquiring knowledge by reasoning and by intuition. The behaviorists believe in bit by bit learning and give it in a formula, stimulus giving rise to response. The cognitivists believe that something mediates this model. Cognitivism believes in the following model, that stimulus is important, giving rise to response, but when stimulus is given, there is something in the human being called the human mind and thinking coming into action. So learning always takes place in totality is what cognitivism believes, and not bit by bit learning as the behaviorists argue. The action or process of acquiring knowledge is by reasoning and intuition of the learner. The learner would have a cognitive map in his or her mind which represents a sum of all learning so far encountered. In a new learning experience, it is screened through cognitive map and amalgamated into the map. And again, the map is redrawn. So learning is a continuous and reappraisal of environment by the learners and a consequent readjustment to it according to cognitivism. Piaget and Lobin have done many experiments on apes under cognitivism. The apes were kept inside the cages, and the theory is an understanding of the series of experiments that are conducted on apes. And it is found that animals exhibit the capacity to comprehend the situation which confronted them and were not entirely dominated by the external stimuli. The apes were put in the individual cages in which a bunch of bananas were hung from the roof, quite out of reach from the apes. The cages had a number of sticks which could be joined to become a bigger stick. The hungry ape tried to jump and reach the bananas and even tried to get the fruits by hitting them with the wooden sticks, but with no success. This is an evidence to show that the animal is able to adopt an alternative technique by interpreting the situation. That is, they could think and they could act. Slowly, they started joining the wooden pieces and make it a bigger stick with the help of which they could get the bananas. Not all the apes could do this, but those who could manage to solve the problem are rewarded with the bananas. Those who were rewarded sat back and thought about the problem and tried to solve the problem by the trial and error method. So, learning for the cognitivists depends upon the perception, the insight formation, and all the learning, according to them, is the nature of problem solving. This new experience constitutes the problem which the learner tries to solve on the basis of previous learning. The cognitivist's view puts the learner in the middle of the learning process and emphasizes the learner's own contribution to the language learning process. Hence, learning is thinking. It is a trial and error method that depends on the perception and insight formation. And all learning, according to the cognitivists, is an problem-solving activity. For the behaviorists, the learner is like a robot, passive, and external agency is stronger and is important for making the individual learn. Whereas for cognitivists, the learner is a man who is very active and something within him is responsible for learning. So, when a learner is confronted by a new situation, according to cognitivism, he or she compares it mentally with the experiences encountered in the past. She or he seems to possess a mental feeling index, which enables her or him to compare the new experience to that of the earlier experiences and tries to find a strategy to plan and solve it. When the learner finds out that it is difficult to solve the new situation with the previous experience by following the trial and error method, she or he thinks of the new strategies and skills to solve them and hence learns something new. So, learning is a problem solving activity by following trial and error method from that already existing mental feeling system, thinking of new ways of solving, making a plan to solve the problem, and storing in the mind as a filling system for future use. All the learning in the form of problem solving is incorporated into the cognitive map, which is the generalized pattern that the learner has learned from a series of experiences. And so the plan is tried out. If it works, it is stored in the memory. If it fails, it is avoided. It is always a trial and error method that the learner adopts. It is always the self learning and the creativity of the learner where the learning will be satisfactory. The cognitive theory is extended to the learning of a language. A child begins to learn a language from the age of 2 and masters the language by the age of 4 or 5 and develops mastery in all the four language skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. She or he makes no errors in the use of the mother tongue at all. The utterances that the child produces, which is the output, is much huge when compared to the utterances that the child hears or the input in the surrounding. The child would come out with the altogether new utterances that she or he has heard or known before. Once the language is learned, the child is confident to tackle any linguistic situation appropriately. The behaviorists fall short of offering a proper explanation to this path with the principle of conditioning, and the cognitivists propose the solution by stating that the language learning is a data processing mechanism. They believe that the input to the learner is not just a number of utterances to which the learner is exposed, but the samples of language data which the child then processes, and the output from this data processing is again not just a number of sentences but a system of rules which allows the learner to produce the utterances. So the input will have the utterances that the child learns, and the language learner will have his mind where the processing takes place in the form of substitutions, and thereby the utterances that the child produces will become the output, which is far more bigger when compared to the input. So the substitution tables are the interesting ways in which the child puts it in his mind. Supposing a child is introduced to this is a pen, SVC situation. This is a ball, again an SVC. This is a pencil. Three different utterances are being introduced to. And similarly, when this is replaced by that, he automatically can produce that is a pen, that is a ball, and that is a pencil. Not only that, with the help of this and that, he can as well produce a new expression like this is my house, this is a house, and that is a college. The child makes his or her own rule inside his mind and then learns the language. Each and every utterance is to be learned from the external stimulus, is what behaviorism believes. Whereas cognitivism believes in making up the rule of whatever has been learned and applying the rule to the new situation as well. It's a problem solving with the help of trial and error method that the child picks up the language, which is more interesting and appropriate. Hence, the learning is not by conditioning, it is by cognition. Cognition is understanding. Conditioning is only practice. Cognition is by insight formation and hypothesis formation. In behaviorism, the learning is automatic and habit formation, while in cognitivism, learning is through discovery. Behaviorism believes in controlled introduction of language items, bit by bit teaching, repetition and drills, over teaching, saturation learning, teacher dominated situation where the learner is very passive. Whereas in cognitivism, This believes in making the learner to think. Use of substitution tables. Language syllabus and teaching methods are no longer as rigidly controlled as they used to be. The teacher would plan out the tasks according to the level of the students. And this approach has made teaching more creative and more flexible. The experiment is on the language and learn through errors that are committed by the individuals. If we compare the behaviorism with the cognitivism, the two important theories of language learning, behaviorism is very dogmatic, whereas cognitivism is highly pragmatic, giving importance to the learner. In behaviorism, one is pretty sure of whatever is being taught and learned, whereas in cognitivism, it is always a trial and error phenomena that has been applied by the learner to pick up the concepts. Behaviorism aims at achieving accuracy. It would never allow any of the errors to be committed by the student. It is always accurate expressions which are practiced and drilled so that it becomes automatic. Whereas in cognitivism, it is fluency that is more important, giving way to errors also. The learner actually learns from the errors that are committed by him and improvises and moves towards fluency. Once the fluency is given importance, automatically the learner learns with his errors and moves towards accuracy. Whereas behaviorism believes in accuracy, cognitivism believes in fluency. Behaviorism believes in repetition and drills and overteaching because everything is controlled by the external agency. Whereas cognitivism believes in problem solving, which is an activity, a mental activity done by the learner himself. The learner learns by solving the problems by himself. So it is more a learner-centric, cognitivism is, and behaviorism is more teacher-centric. Teaching of the language actually started with the behavioristic model, which is teacher-dominated as one observes in the Victorian era, and slowly moves towards cognitivism, which is more learner-centric, where the learner has to solve the problem, where the learner has to learn rather than the teacher over-teaching in the recent times. Thank you very much for being with us in the presentation. Stay tuned for the next videos. Bye for now.